Happy New Year and welcome back to Pixel Football. And as it is that time in the football calendar, I thought we'd look back at some of the most notorious January transfers in Premier League history. And January transfers are a little bit like the January sales. Sometimes you might just find a bargain. So I'm ranking 20 of the best and worst January signings in Premier League history, from inspired mid-season genius to full-blown panic buying. I'll give you my takes, of course, but as always, please let me know in the comments what you think. Okay, so let's start with Virgil van Dijk, who signed for Liverpool from Southampton for £75 million, which was a big fee, particularly for the time. And he's obviously one of the best January signings. I think he would probably top most people's lists. And he's won everything. You know, he's won the Champions League, he's won the Premier League a couple of times. He's now considered one of the best centre-backs in Premier League history. Some agree, some really don't. And I think he probably would be considered an S tier for most people, but I'm actually going to put him in A, just because I think there's some other signings probably to come which might even be better value for money. So yeah, tell me what you think about that one. Moving on to Bruno Fernandes. Obviously signing for Man United from Sporting, costs about £67 million. Again, he's probably considered one of the better January signings. He's been their best player over the past decade, but he's not had much competition in that Man United side. I mean, he's basically carried the team. But does that make you the best ever January signing? I mean, compared to the standards of Man United, I don't think so. So I'm going to put him in B. He's obviously done brilliantly for United, but they've not won anything. So can't really go higher than B. Then we've got Theo Walcott, who signed again from Southampton, but for Arsenal. And the fee was only £5 million. And it eventually rose to more like about 12 million, I think. But considering he was kind of a prodigy, that's actually quite cheap. And no, he didn't become one of the greatest players in the world, or for England for that matter. But he had a decent career at Arsenal. He won trophies, albeit not major silverware. He won the FA Cup. He had a lot of caps for England. So I think, considering they paid £5 million, which rose to something like 12, I think he did all right. So I'm going to put him in C. Okay, here we go. Fernando Torres. Liverpool to Chelsea. Now, for Liverpool, he was one of the best strikers in the Premier League during that time. But, he really tailed off. Chelsea bought him for £50 million in the January transfer window, playing way too much, and he was clearly past his best. And he completely flopped at Chelsea. So I think this has got to go low. I think that's got to go an F. Back to Arsenal then with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. Signed for the Gunners from Dortmund for about £56 million. Again, he was a success at Arsenal. He scored a lot of goals like he has done everywhere. But, he was signed to make Arsenal title challengers again, and even to win Premier League titles and major silverware. And that just didn't happen, despite a really good goal scoring record. So I'm going to put him... he's not as high as Bruno Fernandes, so I'm going to put him in C. Let me know if you think that's a bit harsh, but I think that's about right. Okay, Branislav Ivanovic, onto an actual successful Chelsea signing here for under £10 million from Lokomotiv Moscow. And for me, he's underrated. I think he's probably one of the best defenders in Premier League history. He won everything there was to win at the club, and for a low fee. He was such a strong defender. So I'm putting this. I think he's achieved as much in the game for his club as Van Dijk has. So I'm going to put him in A. Maybe that's too high for some, but I think it's really underrated. Sticking with Chelsea then with Pato. I mean, he was another prodigy, but he completely fell off a cliff. He signed for Chelsea on loan. He never made a permanent move, but he barely played. I think he played for a couple of games, scored one goal, but this was really where it was clearly obvious that Pato was not going to become the player we thought he could. So I'm not going to put him right at the bottom. I'm going to put him in E, which I think's fair. Okay. Okay, Luis Suárez signing for Liverpool from Ajax for just over 20 million. One of the best Premier League strikers of all time. Went on to have a great career with Barcelona, and Liverpool made a profit on this deal as well, which is impressive. Doesn't always happen like that. He never won the Premier League itself though, so can he go? He can't go above Van Dijk and players like that, but he was so good for those couple of seasons at Liverpool. I'm gonna have to put him in A. Yeah, I think that's the right place. And I think signed in the same transfer window was Andy Carroll, signed from Newcastle for £35 million, £12 million more than they paid for Suárez, which in hindsight seems crazy. And he completely flopped at Liverpool, didn't he? He just wasn't good enough. But he wasn't the worst. I don't think he can go all the way down to F. So let's put him in E. Moving on to Dele Alli, who Spurs signed from NK Dons for £5 million, really small fee. And he did really well for them. Obviously, we all know what happened to him subsequently in his career, but there was a great spell when he was playing in that really strong Spurs side. It's a similar fee that Arsenal paid for Theo Walcott. And there wasn't as much hype around Dele Alli when Spurs signed him from MK Dons, but I think he attained a level playing for Spurs that was higher than Walcott. Is that fair? And I think for the money they paid for him, and they got a long period of time for him playing at quite a high level until he did start sliding down. So I'm going to put Dele Alli in B. Okay, this is one of the ones I was waiting for. Séamus Coleman, signed for Everton from Sligo Rovers for just £60,000. When he was signed, £60,000 was nothing. And he's gone on to play for Everton for the remainder of his career. He's been an absolute legend for that club. This is one of those examples where I think he's obviously not achieved as much in the game as a lot of these other players we've discussed, your Virgil van Dijks, etc. But I think for the value that Everton have got from that fee and the service he's given the club, for me, puts it on a high level. Not every club can win Premier League titles, Champions League titles. So I'm putting Séamus Coleman above all of these players so far in the S category. Let me know in the comments if you agree with that one. Okay, from the sublime to the terrible, this is a painful one for Arsenal fans. Källström, who I think was a bit of a Championship manager cult icon. Arsenal signed him on loan from Spartak Moscow. And during the medical, they found out he had a back injury and decided to sign him anyway, even though he clearly wasn't fit to play for the club. And he only ended up playing, 2-3 games for them for the remainder of the season, which was just a crazy decision. And I think at the time, Arsenal really needed players. They were struggling around that era. So that was just an insane signing. So I'm putting Källström in F. I think it's got to go there. Philippe Coutinho, signed from Inter to Liverpool for £8.5 million. I mean, that's a bargain of a signing. He was brilliant for Liverpool, and they made a massive profit on him, selling him to Barcelona for well over 100 million, I think. And he was great for them. And with that, not only was he good whilst at the club, they invested that money into other players, which led them to build a new era. So I think that's a fantastic signing. It had value for money. So I'm putting Coutinho in A. And then moving on to Nemanja Vidić for United, signed from Spartak Moscow for just £7 million. God, that's really, really low fee. And again, he became one of the best centre-backs in Premier League history. So again, he won everything there was to win. So I'm putting him in A. He's got to go in A for me. And then Moisés Caicedo, who signed for Brighton from Independiente del Valle for just £4 million. Again, it's a little bit like Séamus Coleman. £4 million in this day and age, it's just so cheap. And then they made a massive profit on him, selling him to Chelsea for, again, well over £100 million. Did well for them whilst he was there, even he wasn't even there for that long. But I think that's the kind of the Brighton model, Moneyball model. So I'm putting Caicedo alongside Séamus Coleman in category S. Okay, moving on to Clint Dempsey. Signed from the MLS to Fulham for just £2 million. Again, really low fee. And he was a really solid Premier League player. Probably best player from America to get through into the Premier League. You know, had a great goal scoring record as an attacking midfielder. So I'm going to put Clint Dempsey in category B. Yeah. Okay, Alexis Sánchez, who swapped Arsenal for Man United. This is a bad one. I mean, he was so good for Arsenal, but then was so bad for United. I think it was a swap deal. I'm not sure if any money was even exchanged. I think it was a swap deal with Henrik Mkhitaryan, who himself didn't do great at Arsenal. But I think there was so much expected from Sanchez at United, and this was really where this was like a symbolic of where United's decline really started to go down as a club in general. So he kind of personifies that in a way for me, Alexis Sanchez. So I'm putting him in F. He's got to go in F, isn't he? Riyad Mahrez signed for Leicester from Le Havre for just under $500,000. And again, what value? Plucked out of nowhere and helped Leicester win a Premier League title out of nowhere, and then went on to sell him for a massive profit to Man City. Again, criminally underrated, in my opinion, Mahrez as a player. He was amazing for Leicester, and you know, he wasn't always starting for City, but he was fantastic. So I think he's got to go in S as well, given that the value, plucking him out of the French league to become, you know, a Premier League great. It's got to go in S. Okay, Andy Cole from Newcastle to Man United, which I think was a Premier League record at the time for £7 million. I think it's got to be one of the best signings that Man United made around that time. Amazing goal record, Andy Cole. Again, a bit underrated, I think. He had a huge return in goals and never even took penalties, unlike people around the same era, you know, your Alan Shearers. You know, he won the Premier League multiple times. He won the Champions League. He's got to go in A. Maybe not quite at the same level as some of these other bargain signings, but he's got to go in A. And then lastly, we've got Mykhailo Mudryk, who signed for Chelsea from Shakhtar Donetsk for just over £60 million. I mean, this was a weird one, wasn't it? It just felt like they just signed him in spite of Arsenal, because he was so close to joining the Gunners. You know, it was a bit of a sliding doors moment. You know, what would have happened if he had signed for Arsenal? Would his story be completely different? He flopped quite immediately at Chelsea, didn't even get near to anywhere where Chelsea expected him to get to, and for that money. And then obviously he's now been banned for years on a doping charge. So he's got to be the lowest, doesn't he? He's got to go bang straight in F. He's got to. But let me know. That's my rankings of 20 best and worst January signings in Premier League history. I'd love for you to let me know in the comments what you think, if you agree, if you disagree, and if there's any other January signings that your club has made over the years which you think should be in this list. I'd love to hear from you. So give me a comment.